This is essentially a national service program for journalists. And the service, as we see it, is the journalism that you're doing in the community. And so part of the reason why we launched this program is because, as you may also know, there's a real crisis in terms of local news. That has to do with a lot of things, but also, the business model. The business models, especially for traditional mediums like newspapers, have basically been crippled by various factors. And so this service program is meant to be a leg up to newsrooms so that they can hire reporters more easily. We basically are subsidizing reporters for them. It's also meant to be a leg up to reporters who want to be reporting, so that you actually have those opportunities in newsrooms. It used to be a lot easier to get an entry-level reporting position and kind of work your way up from there. Now it's a lot harder. So the hope here is that you know that most of what you learn as a journalist, you learn by doing. So these positions are really critical in order for you to really learn the craft and move forward in your career. And so what does life actually look like for a reporter in this program? So we call them either reporters or we call them core members, and core members is also sort of a nod to this being a service program. So the core members are officially hired by the newsroom. So they become the employee of the newsroom. So we don't employ the reporter. And part of what this allows is just total editorial independence for the newsroom. So they aren't beholden to a nonprofit in terms of their coverage. It's their reporter. So you only have one boss, in theory. Your newsroom is who you answer to. That's your employer. That's who's sending you your paycheck. Report for America covers half your salary, but they send it directly to the newsroom, and then the newsroom pays you. But you have a huge amount of support on the Report for America side. So, both the newsroom and the reporter both get supported by Report for America in a number of ways. So we have a team called the Core Excellence Team. So basically what that is each core member essentially has a case manager who is their mentor, their first point of contact, somebody who can pick up the phone anytime you call, who is checking in with you, I would say at least quarterly, unless you want to be talking with them more. And that same, I guess you could say case manager or core excellence manager is also in touch with the newsroom. And so that kind of helps just sort of have an ear to the ground, understand how the position is going, and kind of help either side, the editor, the newsroom, or the reporter navigate any challenges that come up. In terms of training, there's a big in-person training that happens pretty much right around the time you get started. We actually have the core members land in their newsrooms first, and then we bring them together for training. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but part of the reason for it is that you have a much better understanding of what your needs are in terms of training. And you're much hungrier for those opportunities once you land in your newsroom in your new beat and you're like, I have to build this beat. So we find that that's actually pretty helpful to get a little bit situated and then come to this training. And it's an intensive week-long training that's really tailored to the needs of the reporters in the program. So we already know what the beats are. We already know many of the challenges you're going to face. And then that week, in my view, is also really important relationship building time, because one of the best parts about being in a national service program, including this one, is that you get this wonderful network of, like-minded people or like-missioned people. The starting point for us with the newsrooms, when we did a call out to the newsrooms, we said, what is the most critical coverage gap that you have in your community? It doesn't mean you used to have 2 education reporters or 8 education reporters and now you have 1 and you want another one. That's not what we mean by a critical coverage gap. We mean, look at the community as a whole. Think about all of the media organizations that are in your region. What are the critical coverage gaps there? So what's not being covered, who's not being covered, whose voices aren't being heard, and how can we try to craft a beat for a reporter that would fill that gap? By targeting those most critical gaps, it also helps us understand what the impact of that reporter is. It's easier for us to understand what has changed. So that's another reason why it's important for us to really go after those big gaping gaps. So the beats really range. A lot of traditional beats like healthcare reporter, education reporter, a lot of beats covering particular communities that really aren't being covered at all. For example, the demographics of many regions of the US have changed over the years, and the demographics of the newsrooms didn't necessarily change with them, plus many of those newsrooms have been gutted. So these are newsrooms that have perhaps never before covered the Latino communities in their region, and now are figuring out, how can I do that? So they want to hire a reporter who is bilingual and who can do that coverage for them. So we've got TMJ4. So their beat was really cool. It stood out to me as I was going through the applications. They wanted to specifically focus on 53206 and actually have the reporter live in 53206 because they identified that as, because they identified that as something that they weren't currently doing and really needed to do. So we've got Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, which is out of Marquette, I believe. The Journal Sentinel has actually, these are two separate positions. It's open until January 31st, so it's a pretty healthy window, but you kind of need that window in order to get some letters of reference lined up. So the application itself is super straightforward. I don't even know that it requires a cover letter. I think there are just some straightforward questions about your experience, your skills, and also what service means to you, because this is a little bit different than a job. There's a real spirit of service in it. There's actually a requirement that you volunteer for a couple hours a week, typically on like a youth media type project where you're, contributing your journalism skills to a younger generation. So the questions themselves are pretty straightforward. And of course, you'll include a resume. But we do ask you to include, I think it's 2. I might even double check this. Actually, I'm probably not going to find it that easily, actually. I'm pretty sure we have you include 2 references. So what you would do is you would just include their email address, and then we would contact them, but you would have wanted to reach out ahead of time to kind of line that up. And so because those things tend to take a little while, it's good to get sort of an earlier start on it. Like there's another, I don't want to say requirement, but there's another kind of piece of the service year, which is the enterprise project. We basically encourage the reporter and the newsroom to make sure that before the end of the year that there's a very substantive project or piece that ends up being published. So this is something that we envision that the reporter ends up spending probably a month on total, but sort of spread out over a period of time. We're interested in working with all kinds of emerging reporters in terms of the stage that they're at. We have reporters who started with Report for America right after they graduated undergrad, but had a lot of journalism experience already through internships, through their student paper. We also have some folks who have transitioned to this career later in life. And so that's why we use the term emerging journalists instead of young journalists, because it's not always young journalists who are early career. In terms of applying, you do only apply once. So no matter how many positions you're interested in, whether it's all 250 or just one, you only have to apply once. And you can, in the application, highlight what your preference is. So you could say, I just want to be a health reporter, or I only want to be in Wisconsin or Illinois, or I only want to be a health reporter in Wisconsin or Illinois. You can be as specific or as not specific as you would like to be. And these are additional positions which carry, I think, both some pros and cons. The con is that this is not a forever job. This, it's a year term, and there is an ability to renew for a year. And that renewal, you could potentially be tweaking your beat, you could potentially be increasing your salary a little bit. I've also seen reporters for their second year actually transition newsrooms if they're not thrilled with their newsroom or they really want to spread their wings in terms of a different region or a different beat. So these are temporary positions. Now, I will also say that your first reporting jobs are often also temporary positions, right? I mean, the first job that you get out of school maybe you're not thinking about necessarily having it for more than a couple years. We ask the newsrooms to pay the core members the exact same as they would pay a reporter of the relative experience who is going to be full-time. So the salary difference shouldn't be huge, but these are entry-level reporting types of salaries. The pro, however, is that there's a lot more to the program than just your job. And there are benefits to that. You know, you have your core excellence manager, who's essentially one of your mentors. You get assigned a mentor, you know, who might be a veteran in your beat, you know, or something like that, who's outside of your newsroom, which can be really helpful, really valuable. We're also looking inside the newsroom to say, you know, is there a potential mentor inside the newsroom, right? So there's a lot of support around a core member.